Thank you, man. Thank you for making time, man. Latio, thank you for making time. You know the vibes. You know the vibes.
All the time, always, bro.
Yo, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Creative Hustle Show. In this show, I make sure that I bring you only the best that we have exported from the continent. I have an amazing brother here, a guest I've known for almost 6 years since I moved up here. His name is closer to the northern golden part of Africa. Latios from the beautiful country of South Sudan. Welcome to the show, my bro. Welcome.
Thank you so much, man. I'm doing well. I'm grateful to be here with you. You know, the work that you're doing, and so you said the best exported out of Africa.
Yeah, best exports, man. Best exports at all times. Especially today, we're winding up this. We have an extra year. This is February, an extra day. More than others. So for the bonus, I saved the best for last. You know what I'm saying? Last for best. You know what I'm pissed off about? February.
What?
I feel that we should pay less rent. Because I don't see why we're paying rent for 31 days, the same rent as 29 days. I need my check. This is reparations. Refunds for Black History Month. Shit. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Excuse my French. Our guest is here today, and I want him to tell you so much about what creatives like himself, Pan-Africanists like himself are doing in Seattle. So let's go, break by break. Who are you, and what do you do in Seattle?
Absolutely. So my name is Latio Cosmos. I am from South Sudan, but I was born in Kenya. And that's where, my family's, I consider myself Kenyan, but also I recognize my heritage of coming from Sudan.
It's important.
And when my family left Sudan, it was still one country.
No.
I
didn't know it was Southern. I learned that like close up the time I moved up here.
Yeah. So it happened, when we moved here. But I'm a proud Sudanese, proud South Sudanese, proud African in general. And just being an artist, it's been a journey. It's been a journey, kind of going in and out. And I would say it's a journey of trying, finding about myself, but also how to express. How do I communicate? How do I relate with other people? And for me, as an artist, that's kind of the lens that I've been trying to gain more clarity on. Just find that way to express myself, but also a way to receive the world in a way that's manageable for me.
Authentically to you.
Yes, sir.
Kenya, Sudan. Do you have any memories of Africa, or did you live there quite a long time? Because a lot of my guests, they're like left when they were 5. My wife left like when she was like 12.
Yeah. So I left when I was 11, so around the 5th grade, and so I have a lot of memories. I have a lot of memories, and growing up, we lived in in the northeastern province of Kenya, and so it's very arid desert. Some trees, some wildlife, but it's a really isolated place. And so, as a kid, there's a lot of time on our hands.
So your imagination is wild.
Oh yeah, man. And speaking of being an artist, for me, that actually plays a huge role, because just being in a place that is honestly is quiet. In some ways, it's very quiet. There isn't a lot going on. You get the opportunity, or for some it's an opportunity. For some they're blocked. Exactly. But for me, luckily, it made me courageous to explore. And so I remember, I spent a lot of time out in the forest, in the wild, and just looking at nature, being in nature, experiencing what it's like to, you're outside of civilization in a way.
Organic environment.
Exactly, very organic environment. You learn to navigate, just looking at the environment around you, because you can get lost.
Correct.
And so, I have a lot of memories like that, and that, that always, now I've been spending a lot of time just going back and thinking about those memories. What do they mean for me now? And as an artist now, I'm bringing that into just little by little, bringing some of those memories that I remember from the camp into my music and into my art in general.
You literally answered my first question, but you gave it more perspective. My first question was, can you share your personal experience as a Sudanese-born artist living in Seattle? How has your background influenced your art and perspective on immigrant life? So we'll focus on the perspective on immigrant life, because now you've tasted both worlds. The immigrant life there, because you're an immigrant from another country.
Yes, sir.
And then immigrant life here. How does they compare?
Man, I would say that a big thing I think that has to be looked at, that I've kind of focused on, is the fear the fear that comes with being an immigrant that is not talked a lot about. And for me, it's something that has shaped my perspective because, you know, when we were when I was an immigrant in Kenya, there were fears of, we're being a minority because, the refugee camp has a lot of different nationalities. And so there were, it was majority Somali because we're close to the Somali border. Yeah. But then there were, some small community of Ethiopians and Eritreans. And then we had, the Sudanese people. And so, there can be tensions within communities and things like that. And even, I'll say even the police there, we interacted with them as well. And so there are all these elements that you don't really, I think as an immigrant, you don't really have access to the, controls, the things that are going around you. You don't have control over it. Yeah. And, that has shaped, now coming to America, I'm finding out more and more of a similar fear in some way.
From people, anxiety and stuff.
Just that anxiety of not knowing a lot of different things, whether it's the culture, but also just your own safety. So that's one aspect that, I can compare both. But I think that for me, as an immigrant to America, I got dropped off. One thing that I was on a different podcast, and they made, I would use this as a tagline. Yeah. So it's I went from the bush in Africa. I came to America, and they sent us to the bush, which is back in the rural part of Seattle.
Oh, the back
where it's there are cows everywhere. You can smell the cows.
Some bush to bush situation.
Yeah, we were in the forest, and then we bring us to another forest. They brought us to another forest. And so that also played a huge part in shaping my experience as an immigrant. Because going to 5th grade, middle school, it's just me and my siblings that are the only Black people there, but not even just Black, like African people. We never saw anybody African at all in Carnation where we were, and so that again, there was always a sense that, there was that anxiety, but I couldn't focus on that anxiety. When you're an immigrant, you can't really focus on the things that cause you anxiety. You have to focus on surviving. You have to focus on learning the language. You have to focus on learning the culture. You have to focus on how do I make sure that I don't squander,
or mess up or fumble the bag. It's always, you're always on your toes.
You always have to be, and so that that's definitely been my experience. Coming here from bush to bush, and then working on how do I grow and mature. And for me, I don't know if we're probably going to ask a question about it, but how do I make sure that I play my role as an immigrant to understand where I come from, why I was an immigrant in the situation that I was. What are the causes?
What did that path take you there?
And finding purpose in that, finding purpose in that journey, and in that inquiry of myself and also my environment and my community, and just growing in that way, and really trying to shape my own destiny. Because a lot of time as an immigrant, there's that sense of your destiny is in other people's hands. It's not very comforting. It's not very secure. It's not secure at all. And so for me, it's been a journey of finding that journey for myself and defining my own destiny. That's what it is at the end of the day. How do I empower myself? If nobody is going to empower me,
if you don't empower yourself,
and so I'm like, I'm going to be on this journey no matter how difficult it is to be able to shape my own destiny at the end of the day.
And to add on to that, to piggy on that, to be quite frank, when I was in Kenya, I didn't know what an immigrant life was. We could see them in school. We could see them on the streets. There were a lot of them in 𝐸𝐶𝐸 at that time when I was younger. That was like 90s. I grew up, there was even white immigrants in Kenya at that time. There were some of them in my class. I didn't even know. I didn't know immigrant life completely, let me tell you. Till I moved up here 16 years ago. Now that my wife and me were we were bonding on more than the surface level, trying to understand, because she also came from Somalia. She came through the refugee camp. My dad worked in the army as an officer, and he was serving some of the places that were being dispatched, like Sierra Leone, like Congo, northeastern, like Somali. Our parents never spoke about this stuff. So now I'm getting to understand both perspectives when my wife is explaining to me how refugee was, and now I'm here. And then now I'm the refugee in the country, and she's not the refugee. And now whenever I'm telling her some of my fears, she's like, what do you think Kenya was? And I'm like, bro, trying to get like your work authorization or get this is hard. She's like, think about that in Nairobi when, and I'm talking about all social, political, economic. Like when you're trying to start a business, people are skeptical about you. They have stereotypes.
Bro.
When you're dating your own, and she made me like literally aware of some of the biases that even us back home have. Like, would your mother let you marry a Sudanese girl? No. Would your mother let you marry a Somali girl? No. Then why do we make it harder to understand that Americans have the same stereotype, like, we don't know who you was. Are your intentions pure? What do you want? And that opens a lot of line of conversations, but we're gonna get deeper into that, right?
Yeah. I want to.
Right on. And we have your father was in the army too.
Man, that is
Let's get into it. Just a little bit. Tell us about your dad.
Okay. Before we go into my dad, I want, because I think it does tie into what, who he became at the end of his life.
Think about it.
So I will take a roundabout way to answer to get to him. But you were talking about how your experience here with trying to get documentation for employment and work and things like that. And similarly, the economic integration of refugees, even in Kenya, has been a major issue because, like I said, the area where we were placed, and that's just not just the 𝐷𝐿𝐼 refugee camp complex, where there were hundreds of thousands of people. In Kakuma as well. These are very isolated places, and I don't know if it's a government policy or UN policy
to separate.
To keep the immigrants from being economically integrated into the host nations. And so there is a purposeful isolation of immigrants and a prevention of immigrants. Even it's so difficult because they provide education, secondary education, but in order for you to even think about attending a tertiary institution was out of the question. Even starting businesses, like people had little mom and pop shops, but there wasn't really that potential to grow,
to expand
economically. It was just
they want you right there as refugees.
Dependent. That's another thing. Made sure that refugees are dependent, and I'll tie into my father. So before he, I'll go backwards. So at the time when we were at the refugee camp, a part of his responsibilities was working with the UN to make sure that our community received the ration. So you would go maybe once or twice a month. You get this small bag of flour. You get a little bit of oil, maybe some sugar, maybe some salt. But most of the time, it's all everybody. It's not everybody. So that was his position at the time. Before he passed, he was kind of working on just making sure our community got what they needed to do. But, just going back to when you're talking about the military thing, there was he was unwillingly taken into the military.
Man, I never heard of that, because when I was growing up, everybody wanted to be part of the army because, those people are struggling with employment. Yeah. And one of the best places to work was under the army because the benefits, right? You have free housing. Free healthcare. So people wanted to join. I remember when my dad almost pushed me to it after high school. I said, hey, not me. Yeah. Explain to us what forced is, because some people don't understand what forced is.
So, part of, for him, because, in our family, it's a major point of education. You have to get your education, correct? And so he was more on that journey of working to become more educated so he can be able to do more for our community, because this was in the 80s, late 80s. And so he was at that age when he was about to, attend college and all these different things. But the war was breaking out, and, our family, so my mom and my older brother were the only ones who were part of the family at the time. And so everybody was getting pushed out and displaced in a similar manner that is happening again right now. Now, in Sudan and in Congo. But he was conscripted into the military. So they took him to the north of Sudan. And, they were giving him, forcing him to train all these different weapons, just to become a military man. And, he was a part of that. However, he was stubborn because he understood the consequences of being a part of the military, and what you have to do and what happens to your own country,
to your own people,
to your very own people. And so he refused that, and he was jailed for a period of time because of his resistance and not wanting to be a part of that institution that was causing so much pain. And the people that took him was the government, but the people that we are from the South were the rebels at the time. You get what I'm saying? And so he was taken by the opposing force to be trained to be a part of it, but he was like, no, I'm not going to be a part of that.
Because you're going to be afflicting
I'm like,
people,
what? Yeah, why would I do that? And so, but he was able to manage his escape, and a few other people, they managed to escape, and they ended up going to Ethiopia to meet up with the rest of our family, which was my brother and my mother at the time. And, you know, the stigma stuck with him. The stigma of, you know, you were taken to be trained by these people. Are you a spy? There was that lack of trust
at all times.
That was gone, and it wasn't just him. It was because it was a whole other group of young men that escaped. Yeah, and you know there was that distrust of them by other Sudanese people, but also by the Ethiopians, and so you know there was just this constant politic that was politics that was just happening around, and even then Ethiopia got too full of refugees. That's where, you know, the Kenyan came in, and so now hundreds of thousands of people had to migrate also to go to Kenya
again. And this being uprooted is really messing up your mental health. Like every time, like you're not stable. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
No. And so, you know, and you know, it's not, you know, there's a lot of those negative things. However, I think, you know, with my brother especially, you know, one of the things I know about him, he speaks like 5, 6, 7 different languages.
So something came out of it. Something came out of it, yeah.
Always, and I would say that's part of the Africanness of our, you know,
you get to learn,
You move through difficulty, but you know there are gems that come out of it. You know,
that's where wisdom comes in. He has to be tested.
Exactly, and so that's one of the things. You know, he now he can speak Amharic and all these different languages, but you know they had to move once more again and ended up in Kenya, the refugee camp where we were at. And you know the story is long. I can keep telling the story.
We go into it. I'm telling you, we can be a whole day.
Yes, sir.
I love to share these stories because a lot of the guests I have, the people who come and sit on the hot seat, they don't have these experiences, and that's the beauty of us, like opening up our stories. Because remember, like when we just spoke before we started recording about the X and how it's related to Pinto de Gama. It's important. I had to take myself from my comfort zone to kind of like understand. That understanding makes you understand why your paths cross with certain people to learn certain things at certain time. Like for example, we met 6 years ago, CRU.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you. You invited me to that
cultural night.
Cultural night.
Yeah.
Before we get into the cultural night, because that was big. Big up to CRU, by the way, for allowing African students to be in that space.
Big time.
All the sponsors stuff.
Time.
But how was your school integration now that you're in America? Because you're speaking for a lot of immigrant kids. So how was that for you? Like getting into class, American system. You're learning American English because in
Ghana they call it a rich contemporary. that's you know that. But education, man. Again, like I said before, my father was a huge you know, education and, you know, making sure that we learned, make sure we were always doing our best in school. I don't know if you remember in primary school, and they probably did in secondary school too, in Kenya, where they had like, you know, they would rank students, right? At the end of each semester, you're like, there's the number 1 student, number 2, number 3, and then the rest of y'all.
The rest of y'all, you're down there. Developing classes.
It was, you know, coming from that environment, you know, where, you know, coming to the US where it wasn't as competitive for, you know, even though we were in the refugee camp, it was ruthless with education. But then you coming here, it was a little bit more relaxed, you know. But at the same time, I already had that deep desire that was implanted in me that you have to learn. You know, you're here to learn.
Soak in as much as you can. Yeah,
exactly. So I was, you know, for me, I never really took education lightly. No. It's
a weapon. It's a tool.
It's a tool. It can be, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's something that can't be taken away from you. If it's in here, there's no way anybody can get it out of here. Correct. If it's, you know, if it's in there. And so, you know, I would say the first, you know, few years, I grew up on the east side, so I went to Duval. There's an elementary school there, small. You know, we were the cheetahs.
The teachers.
Our logo, our mascot was the cheetahs, and so that was, you know, kind of my first experience in the education. I still remember, like, you know, my day. You know, the first day I was there, and just I remember. Okay, I'll tell you a story. So. I come in 5th grade, right?
Yeah, talk to me.
Where we're studying social studies, right? And this time they were like, oh, we're studying the states, and so they're like, we're going through the class. The teacher was like, all right, each of you guys, I'm calling you guys to name a state, right? And so we were going with some of these names, Arkansas, Washington. And for me, it's my turn. I said Chicago. Chicago's a state. And I was like, that's a state.
That's a big state.
They're like, no, that's Chicago's not a state. And I was like, and for me, I remember that. I was so embarrassed. It was trauma.
You don't understand how Chicago was important for us.
but yeah, man, there was definitely a learning curve.
Yes.
And like you said, the language.
Yeah.
I knew a little bit, but I had to learn a lot more. And so from that in 5th grade in Duval, and then 6th and 7th grade, I was in the middle school, Totes Middle School in Carnation.
Yeah.
And throughout these times, for me, I was, all the way to even high school, for me, even though I was focused on my education, other things became of importance for me too. So, my sister convinced me to play basketball. Before that, I wasn't really playing basketball, so she convinced me to pick up basketball.
So you're playing basketball?
She's
center?
She was a post. She was a post, and so she just.
Oh, stereotypes, bro. They wanted you to be a doctor. So like, what are you throwing a ball for? We did this at home. There was no money. Still, we found out how much they paid LeBron. Then we are like, oh,
okay, maybe
it's something here.
Yeah, but being in the so for me, that was when I started getting more involved in athletics, and that kind of started taking me away from my education. But I was still, for me, one thing is reading. That's one thing that never.
You love books. I've seen you post a lot of the material that you go through.
I love reading, and so. Whenever I was in school, I may not be doing so hot in math.
Correct.
I did well in my science classes, but then my reading and writing, that was really like that was my bread and butter.
That was your bread and butter.
That was it. I'm like, I could do that in my sleep, man. And so. And then, and I'll tell you another story. So in middle school, I like, I put a little bit, tiny stories here. So in middle school, we had a football team. And I think it was 6th grade.
You got to confirm to our people in Africa. Is it football or soccer?
It was American football.
Okay, good.
American football. Where, you hit each other.
Yeah.
And I never knew the sport. I'm coming from Africa. You don't play football. We don't, or at least American football. So, they put, like, oh, go try it out. And so I was like, okay, I'll try it out. We were training. I'm just skinny little African kid, refugee kid. I'm going,
what is this? These guys are big. What are you eating? Are you really 12?
That's what I was like, it's birth certificate, man.
How old are you? They look like the Nigerian football team. Everybody's under 16 looking 50.
Ain't no way, man. But they put me on there, and they put me so I was a halfback. So they give me the ball and say run, because I was fast. I was faster than everybody. So they were like, all right, all our plays was just basically give me the ball, and so the only other there was another black kid. There were 2 other black guys in our grade. Well, 3, but one of them. He was giant. It was a giant dude. And his dad was actually a sheriff, but that's neither here nor there. But he was huge. And so one of our plays was basically, all right, the big guy comes, he runs this way. Give the ball to me. And so we have the big black guy running in front of me and the small black guy running behind him. Just he trucks him over, and then you break through the hole, and so, but unfortunately, man, we didn't win any games, right? So we had one last game at the end of the season. It was a home game, right? And I remember I scored all our points. We couldn't score at all, except for when they gave me the ball. I'm the newest guy. I didn't even know what football was, but I would carry the ball to the end zone. And so I was able to score a touchdown that game, and then we ended up winning the only game of the season that we ever won. And then for me, my favorite memory was they did the thing where they take the Gatorade thing.
Oh yeah,
I was like, hey. It was a good memory, man. Hey,
at Seattle U, how did your experience at Seattle U shape your approach in dealing with? Because I know you have not touched it yet, but you lost a lot of people moving from these countries all the way to Kenya through America. How did it help you deal with grief and difficult circumstances, considering your background? You're an artist. You were an artist since then, because your creativity, your mind was already going down. How did this shape you up?
Man, I think about my sophomore year at Seattle U, that's when I stopped playing basketball because I started playing in middle school through high school. I was, I wanted to take it to the next level.
Correct.
So I found a way to be able to walk onto the Seattle U basketball team, and I was a part of that. And then, until my sophomore year, a bunch of stuff happened, and then sophomore year, it came to a point where I had to make a choice. I had to make a choice about whether I was going to continue knocking on the door of sports and athletics and basketball, or I was going to switch over and really focus now on my academics and my development in the future, through scholarship. And so I made the choice, man. It was like winter break. I was just, everybody else has gone home from except for the basketball team. We're the only ones on campus. And it just, for me, it hit. Yeah, it was like, this is, it's not right. This is not the right place for me to be. The basketball, athletics, all those different things is no longer working for me. So I made the switch over. But what happened after that was the floodgates opened to begin to deal with a lot of these things that I had been blocking away and using athletics and all that other things to kind of, help me propel me forward. But I don't have to look at the grief. I don't have to look at, the journey that I've been on. And, even my African community, like I didn't focus on that because I was focused. I was like, I got to be basketball oriented. I wanted
to be assimilated to the American culture so hard.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because that's what we wanted to do. That was our little dream.
Yeah. And so stopping basketball, then all that began to flood in. And I can't say that even now I'm still beginning to process those things because I had to learn that I had to process these things, and then, okay, how do I want to process these things? And, after sophomore year at Seattle U, my junior year, I was able to travel to Ghana. And that was a huge part of me, learning how to digest my grief,
your past,
my past in general. And I wanted to do it in an African way. And so, learning about ancestral healing. And that's where the work with ancestors comes in. And African spirituality, all these different things. Hey, Seattle, you don't get me for this one. But so I checked out a book by Mr. Mbiti. He's a Ugandan scholar, and it's a little red book that was on African spirituality. I checked that book, but I never returned it back to the Seattle U library.
What was the nature to that?
But that was really a part of me learning, like, okay, I have all these different things that I have to deal with as a person. We all have our things to deal with.
Correct.
But how can I do it in a way that honors my ancestors, that honors all these great Africans that came before, whether they were on the continent or they were enslaved and brought here, they did work to pave the way for African and Black people to thrive in this world, period. We have to go and study those different things and use their prescriptions. When we talk about healing ourselves, these scholars are mental doctors, there are therapists, there are psychologists, you know what I'm saying? Because they've thought about these issues that we're facing, a long
time ago.
You know what I'm saying? They've already done the work. And so what became important to me was studying the history that they wrote down and the prescriptions that they made for us as the next generation, and then applying them for myself. So when I was in Ghana, I wrote my final paper before I came back. It was called, the re-Africanization process. They asked us if you could create a program to re-Africanize our people, how would you do it?
A template,
basically. So I created that template for myself, and ever since then I've been living it. It's definitely taken me on a journey, but that's a part of the healing, is you have to be able to go through some of the difficult things and face them and overcome them.
Difficult conversations, all that put together.
Exactly. But the good thing is that the template provides, for me, knowing where I want to end up, and looking at all these scholars that have walked the path and said, this is what you need to do. So I've taken, we had literally created a grid of like Kwame Nkrumah. We have Frantz Fanon. And I would say the first step for me was, especially with Frantz Fanon, and that's somebody that we should all definitely get familiar with.
Check that out.
Frantz Fanon. But he was talking about, colonialism, but also just the importance of your lived in environment. And then I take that one step further back. It's as simple as the clothes that you wear. These can all be tools of resistance against anybody that wishes to
change you.
You know what I'm saying?
Convert you.
Exactly. So you have to find these little areas of resistance within your everyday life in order to then now be able to then grow, you know, where your very embodiment is resistance, but then your environment becomes a resistance. That's why for me that propelled my painting, my visual art, is that I'm not going to just go get whatever decorations are out here. I'm going to create decorations, my own things that speak to the story that I want to speak to, that speak to the aspirations that I have. I'm going to bring that and put that on a canvas and hang that in my room. And so for me, it's just that slow process. It began that slow process of reshaping myself internally, but then reflecting that outward and letting these layers fall away of, you know, just, you know, we want to call it oppression or whatever you want to call it, but these un-African aspects of myself that, you know, make me fearful, or like, why am I afraid? Finding that fear, how do I fight it back? You know, finding the ancestral remedy for that. So all these different things, it's all a step. I'm still in the middle of that journey, but it became with something as small as just learning to like find that, you know, how you can resist within your own means, and then growing it.
Your whole body, spirit is a canvas of what the message you're doing to the world.
Exactly. So it, you know, being at Seattle U and getting that opportunity to travel back home to Africa.
That's a beautiful thing. If you have an opportunity like that, if you're in Seattle U or UW or Central,
go back home.
Go back home. Go check out, man. Just don't go to Ghana during Afrochella. Go normal days.
Hey, here's the thing. If you go in August, right? You can go for your whole semester, and then your reward will be Afrochella.
Oh yeah,
because it's in December.
It's in December, yeah. So you just knock off the threes. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, go to school,
weather,
you know,
food.
Hey,
that
man,
would be good, bro.
Hey,
talking about that. What does Pan-Africanism mean to you, and how does it influence your work as a musician or as an artist, as a creative?
I'll say Pan-Africanism, you know, okay, there are two histories of Pan-Africanism that I am, you know, that I've learned. So some will say that Pan-Africanism perhaps started, you know, in the late 1800s, right? We can talk about that, but the preference, I want to say it's a preference, but also it's backed by scholarship, that Pan-Africanism is actually much, much older than the enslavement of African people in the Western Hemisphere. Pan-Africanism is much older than it. It wasn't just it didn't come about as a resistance to our enslavement. No. It was something that began all the way in Kemet. So we can look at what's carved in the stones in ancient Kemet, which some, you know, people call ancient Egypt today. But if you look through the historical narrative that has been etched in the walls, you can learn that, you know, and this ties into the story of, you know, for me coming from Sudan and, you know, as Sudanese people being the older sister civilization to what became ancient Egypt. Everything that Egypt had or became came from the interior of Africa. And so when we talk about Pan-Africanism, and I want to go to the older version of Pan-Africanism that began in ancient Kemet, was because of an invasion coming in from, you know, modern day, you know, the Arabic Peninsula.
Portuguese and all them peoples.
Even before them, this was before the Portuguese came to Africa. This was, you know, thousands of years ago when the Arab world began in their incursions and invasions of African people. That was the first, you know, the pharaohs then put out the call for unification of African people all in the northeast part of Africa. So they put out that call, and, you know, it was serious because they understood the consequences, which now we're bearing. We were witnessing what happened, you know, with the enslavement of our African people that were taken, you know, into the Arab world, and then later on, you know, our Western African people that were brought to the Americas. They knew that this was coming, and so when they made the call out for Pan-Africanism, it was, you're going to join us, or you're going to be against us, because they understood. And so there was that, you know, there were some kingdoms that decided to come together. Because
they don't want war. They were not used to, we had like our inner tribe or whatever, but the magnitude of what they were trying to bring was going to cost.
Exactly. So it was like overcome your prejudices against one another because you understand there's a greater threat coming. And so that was the initial call for the first Pan-Africanism. And, you know, history played itself out. And then now in the 1800s, it resurged. And I think tying it to that ancient root for me, it just means that we're not the first to think of these ideas.
They've been there.
They've always been there, and there's a reason as to why they're there. And so when it comes to my art, I proudly represent Sudan, but then also I recognize that I have ancestry that's from Senegal.
Right.
And so I tap in with my Wolof brothers, and even traveling to Ghana.
Yeah.
When I was there, I remember there was we traveled to the northern part, and it's called the Larabanga Mosque. But it was a mosque that was built in the Sudanic style of architecture, which is prevalent in Mali. When we talk about the Djenné, or when we talk about Timbuktu, the buildings that are built there, that's the Sudanic style of architecture. But there's this mosque that, the oldest mosque in West Africa was built with the Sudanic style. And there's a whole lore behind it. But for me, that was just another reason, or not just reason, but another way of tying that Sudan, even though we're all the way on one side of the continent, we have connections with the people in Senegal, and even the, when we talk about the people I'll specifically say the 𝐓𝐇 people of Ghana and Togo, their narrative, their history says that they came out of ancient Egypt, or Sudan, in that region. So there are narratives that link us, that, we are just long lost cousins and brothers and family members that spread out on this vast piece of land. And so when I'm making my music, I'm not shy to, the guitar thing, I'm learning it, and I'm infusing that Malian, desert blues. I want to be able to incorporate that, but also rapping. I'm already rapping, and that's an art form that comes from the griots of Senegal that have, it came over on this side of the water. And so there's rapping. I want to, incorporate the blues. And then for me now, the last part of it is I'm learning my tribal rhythms, which they're very different. They're very different from a lot of the rhythms that are dominant in Africa, which for me, I realize that is probably most likely part of the reason why I'm an artist, is to be able to bring that, Bari, Pojulu rhythms and bring it to the rest of the world and share this rhythm and share this culture, and share the instruments. And one of my favorite things I saw was the brother from Mali. He was playing the adungu.
Adungu, yeah. Is that like a guitar?
It's the grandfather of the guitar.
Yeah. So it's like the bazoo. In Greece they have the bouzouki. So that's almost like the shared history that we have with guitars. But I'd like to research more on this particular guitar.
Yeah, and so the stringed instruments, and so just for me, it's the music. I want to become a symbol of just how we can, build our culture, where aspects of my culture that are no longer alive or relevant in some scenarios, I can go over to my brother in Kenya, talk with you, you teach me your knowledge, and then I implement that in my everyday life. I go to, Ghana, they teach me something, I can implement that. And so I think, not just as an artist, but just as an African, as a human being, we have to become more comfortable with sharing our culture so that I can strengthen you where you're weak, and you can strengthen me where I'm weak.
Like institutions. Correct.
We are institutions, man.
I like that, institutions, man.